that were made in 2022 are not being met. So that is just one aspect of it, and I'm sure people will keep agitating for more.
Well, Iran will hold a runoff presidential election after results released Saturday showed the lowest turnout in decades. Voters will now choose between a conservative candidate, Saeed Jalili, and reformist Masoud Pezeshkian on July the 5th. Both failed to secure a majority in the first round, which saw just around 40% of Iranians actually cast a vote. That's the record low since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The election will decide who replaces Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash last month, along with Iran's foreign minister and 6 other people. Let's get more now on that runoff presidential election. Negar Mortazavi joins us. She's an Iranian-American journalist and senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. Great to have you back on the program. What more can you tell us about these 2 candidates now in this runoff election and the pretty big differences between them?
Great to be back, Carl. So as you said, one of them, Saeed Jalili, a former nuclear negotiator and ultra hardliner and conservative, belonging to really the core of that hardline faction of the regime, and by many believed to be the favorite or one of the top favorite candidates for the supreme leader and the hardline side of the regime. Masoud Pezeshkian, a former health minister in the reformist administration of President Khatami, the reformist president, is a reformist, 5 times a member of parliament. And it was a surprise even that he was allowed to run, that he was qualified for the election as the sole reformist candidate. The expectation was that nobody would be able to run. And he essentially brought this upset result, a surprise result, and is leading. He's not the winner per se, the president yet. They have to go to a runoff, but he came out with the highest number of votes in an election, as you said, with the lowest voter turnout in Islamic Republic.
You said there you're surprised that Pezeshkian did as well as he did. He's seen as a reformist. I mean, what does it actually mean in Iran? I've heard that he's someone who's actually spoken out against the way that the regime has treated some of these protests we've seen in recent years.
Yes, well, so if we look at what is allowed within the system, the regime of the Islamic Republic, what's considered legal sort of opposition, these reformist factions within the regime or the relative moderates have different economic, political, social, and cultural policies and views when it comes to the comparison with the hardliners, obviously the conservatives. They're seen as the more liberal faction within the Islamic Republic. And Masoud Pezeshkian is one of those. The economic policies that he's been promoting, the foreign policy as far as relations with the world, talking to the world, not fighting everyone, not sort of having conflict with everyone, with our neighbors, as he says. And also, as you said, critical of the social and cultural policies, including the morality police, and as he says, the way women and girls are being treated on the street, which is also a reference to the death in custody of Mahsa Amini 2 years ago.
The turnout for this preliminary round was not very high, the lowest since 1979. There seems to be a pretty big movement to boycott this election, though. Do you think people might come off the sidelines if they have a chance to vote for somebody who they see as a reformist?
Well, the Islamic Republic is dealing with very high voter apathy for obvious reasons. There have been a lot of grievances that the state is not responding. They've also closed the space for what was relatively competitive elections, presidential elections in the past, by eliminating and disqualifying reformist and moderate candidates, and really just giving very few options to the constituents to choose. And also protest after protest has been met with violent crackdowns and really brutality by the state. So this high level of apathy is seen in the low turnout of this presidential election and the one before. But the runoff usually has a specific a feel to it. Maybe part of the constituency of the voters of the reformists will realize that their vote is really critical right now, that Masoud Pezeshkian was indeed able to pass through that filtering, that he was able to deliver this leading vote within that framework, and that if they don't come to the ballots, they would have to live with someone like Saeed Jalili, an ultra-conservative, very hardline candidate, for the next 4 to 8 years of their lives. So there's potential that Masoud Pezeshkian can pull this off and even come out as the winner in the runoff next week.
Negar, we have about a minute left, but if you could just remind us, I mean, it has been a really interesting time for Iran, just embroiled in all kinds of turmoil. Just remind us about the background that Iran is going through around these elections.
Well, as I said, coming out of about a year of protests, the Women Life Freedom protests after the death in custody of a young woman in the custody of the morality police, that was 2 years ago. Iran is also indirectly involved in the Middle East war and what's going on between Israel and not just Hamas, but the so-called Axis of Resistance, who are allies and supported by Iran. Also, economic sanctions, very strict economic sanctions have been impacting the country's economy, combined with internal corruption and mismanagement. These all have been themes that have been discussed in the debates, but nevertheless, they were not able to bring a big majority of the voters to the poll.
Negar Mortazavi, Iranian-American journalist and senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. Thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.